Welcome back to MTN Fantasy Football. So we have a waiver wire show here on this, Tuesday morning, I guess, when this comes out. We're going to have some guys I would pick up, some guys I'm okay dropping, some guys I would trade for, some guys I would like to trade away. Got everything covered. So I have 11 transactions here. Hopefully you guys enjoy this video, and let's get into it. All right, so on to the transactions. Just finished watching Monday Night Football. Great finish. Just watched Nikola Jokic just tackle some guy in the heat. Markieff Morris. Crazy night in sports here. Anyway, so number one, add Van Jefferson. So Van Jefferson, of course, is now a second-year receiver out of Florida. And ever since Tutu Atwell, who was, I think, a second or third round pick of the Rams in this past draft, and now DeSean Jackson's gone, now he's on the Raiders, there's going to be more playing time for a guy like Van Jefferson. Now, the Rams lead the NFL in 11 personnel sets on offense, which means 3 wide receivers on the field. So there's going to be Cooper Kupp, there's going to be Robert Woods, and there's going to be Van Jefferson. So Van Jefferson will be on the field a lot. And Van Jefferson played a season-high 96% of snaps here in week number 9. So I would go out there, I would add Van Jefferson. I don't know if I could start him right away. He has to kind of earn my trust first, but definitely keep him on the bench because in that high-powered offense and getting that amount of playing time, good things will probably happen in the future there. So definitely stash Jefferson, keep him on the bench. If a guy like Woods or even Kupp goes down, his value goes through the roof. So I would definitely add Jefferson and see what happens as the season goes on. Next, we have running back Brandon Bolden of the New England Patriots. So Bolden I talked about a couple weeks ago. He had a 2-point week followed by a 10-point week in full PPR formats, but Brandon Bolden now may have a chance to be the starter in week 10 because the guys in front of him on the depth chart, Rhamondre, Stevenson, and Damien Harris, of course, have head injuries. So if those guys miss next week, we're looking at a situation where it could be Brandon Bolden and J.J. Taylor. And J.J. Taylor is definitely not an every down back, so Brandon Bolden will probably get a lot of work. He's a good receiving back. I'm playing the Cleveland Browns. It's not the best matchup for fantasy running backs, but getting like a possibly 65-35 split in favor of Brandon Bolden getting the goal line work, it's probably worth a start. He'll probably be like Carlos Hyde was last week, just get all the volume, hopefully better because Carlos Hyde had a fumble and was pretty underwhelming, but this is a better offense, I feel like, and I think it's a pretty good situation if Brandon Bolden's pretty much the only viable starter in the Patriots backfield. So if Rhamondre Stevenson and Damien Harris miss, Brandon Bolden is probably worth playing here in week number 10. Transaction number 3 is one that I hate personally, but you got to add Mark Ingram. I think it's the right thing to do as much as it sucks. Mark Ingram now, of course, is on the Saints once again. He started the year with the Houston Texans, and he was not a guy I was looking to own, but now that he's on a better team and in a better situation, he is one Alvin Kamara injury away from being very, very fantasy relevant. So he's now one of the high-end handcuffs, kind of in that territory of like an Alexander Madison, even a Tony Pollard. I still prefer those guys over Ingram, but he's in that territory now. So since joining the Saints in week number 8, so it's been 2 games, Ingram played 29% of snaps in his first game back with New Orleans and played 34% last week. He's getting some goal line touches, getting some receptions as well. He's eating into Alvin Kamara's workload. If you're an Alvin Kamara owner and you're freaking out, I'm going to talk about Kamara later, so stay tuned. I think it's like number 9 or 10 or something, but it's on this list, so I'll talk about Kamara later. Mark Ingram is a pain in my ass. I own Kamara in a league. I actually picked up Ingram in that league as well, just for insurance. You know, once you get to that later part of the year, it's better to own some high-end handcuffs in case something happens. Alvin Kamara has been durable throughout his career, but this has been a crazy year for fantasy, so anything could happen. And if you have a spot on your bench, I think Mark Ingram's a pretty high-end handcuff and is probably worth owning. Transaction number 4 is add Logan Thomas if he's been dropped in your league. I feel like most competitive leagues that have IR spots are probably not dropping him, but there's a chance. So check your waiver wire and see if Logan Thomas is there. Some teams are lucky enough to have a Travis Kelce, a George Kittle, a Darren Waller, but a lot of teams out there don't have those guys, and you kind of need some tight end help. And Logan Thomas could be that guy in the second half of the year. Last year, Logan Thomas was the tight end 6 on the season, weeks 1 through 16. So Logan Thomas has done it before. It was at this point last year where he really started to get better and just become a well-known, relevant fantasy tight end. So Logan Thomas can come back to a Washington offense that their defense is not playing well. They'll be in some pass-heavy games probably, and the only actual receiving weapon on that team is Terry McLaurin, sure, J.D. McKissick as well, but they need somebody else, and of course Logan Thomas is going to be a guy who can, command, I would say 7, 8 targets a game maybe. And if he converts on 5 or 6 catches, has a decent floor in PPR formats, if he finds the end zone, that's great. So he might be like a low-end tight end 1 the rest of the year, and Washington needs some receiving help. So I would add Logan Thomas if you need some tight end help in fantasy. Transaction number 5 is add Pat Freiermuth, the tight end for the Pittsburgh Steelers, if you haven't already. Now, when I took the screen grab of his stats, we were still in, the second quarter, I think. So the Steelers game is now over. So at that point, he had 11 fantasy points. He ended the day with 21.3 fantasy points on Monday Night Football. He had 6 targets, 5 catches, 43 yards, and 2 touchdowns. His second touchdown was awesome. He just completely took the ball away from somebody. Not like mossed him, but I don't know. It was a nice catch in the corner of the end zone. So Pat Freiermuth, yes, he's benefiting because Erie Ebron, the other tight end on Pittsburgh, has missed the past 2 games, but the Steelers' coaching staff is not stupid. They know that Pat Freiermuth is the better option than Erie Ebron, and I do think Freiermuth is going to have a pretty nice sized role the rest of the year. Pittsburgh, look, they're not the best offense out there, but we know Ben Roethlisberger, his history with tight ends, Heath Miller and Vance McDonald, all those guys. He loves to look their way in the red zone. So Pat Freiermuth's a talented kid. If Kyle Pitts was not in this draft, he would have been the tight end 1 probably for most people. So Pat Freiermuth's probably worth owning. And I think he's at a point now where you can kind of trust him to start him. They're playing the Lions next week. That's a good matchup, honestly. So if you have Pat Freiermuth and you need some tight end help, then fire him up. I feel like it's going to be a good game for him in week number 10. Transaction number 6 is add Carson Wentz. So Carson Wentz has kind of been on fire lately. He's had at least 2 passing touchdowns in every game since week 4. He was a streamer last week against the Jets, came through, had a 272-yard game with 3 passing touchdowns. And I have another guy on this list, Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan is at Dallas next week, and we know Dallas' secondary is not that great. As much, hype as Trayvon Diggs gets, he allows a lot of yards, and Dallas' secondary in general allows a lot of yards. And Matt Ryan had a great week last week against a better Saints defense. So both of those guys are some of my favorite streaming options here for week number 10. I prefer Carson Wentz. I'm not scared off by Jacksonville's defense yet. Yes, they played well against Buffalo, but let me see them do it twice before I really start to buy in here. Carson Wentz is on a heater right now. I would keep riding that, and I think I'll have a good week here in week 10. Transaction number 7 is drop Boston Scott if you have to. I think some of us may be kind of we feel like we have to hold on to him because we may have spent some money on him last week or may have used a high waiver claim on him. Boston Scott, you don't have to keep him. Boston Scott, once Miles Sanders comes back from the IR next week in week 11, Boston Scott's not going to be very usable at all anymore. And if you remember, when Miles Sanders was playing, Boston Scott barely played. I think Boston Scott had 2.5 fantasy points the first 7 weeks of the year. So Boston Scott was not fantasy relevant at all. Kenneth Gainwell was playing over him. And as we know, it was a weird situation. Kenneth Gainwell was supposed to be the guy. Then Boston Scott was the guy. Boston Scott was supposed to be the guy this week. And then Jordan Howard was the guy. So the Philly backfield is awful. I hate trying to predict it. So I'm kind of just going off of Scott here, and they play Denver at Denver in week number 10. Not an easy matchup. So look, if I'm playing a Eagles running back, which I don't want to, it's going to be Jordan Howard for the touchdown upside. If Boston Scott has a great game, then so be it. I'll be wrong about it. But yeah, I can't trust this backfield anymore. And if you have to drop somebody, Boston Scott, I'm fine doing it. He was out-carried 17-10 by Jordan Howard, who once again was on the practice squad a few weeks ago. So craziness in the Eagles backfield, but I could drop him if you need to. Transaction number 8 is buy Saquon Barkley. No, this is not the biased Giants fan here, but buy Saquon Barkley if you have a good record. If your fantasy team is 9-0, 8-1, 7-2, 6-3 even, and you think you're going to make the playoffs, I would buy Saquon Barkley. I think Saquon Barkley is going to have a good second half of the year, and the Giants, according to Fantasy Pros, have the second easiest strength of schedule for the running back position in fantasy. So their schedule is awesome for fantasy running backs. At Tampa's tough, but after that, Philly, Miami, the Chargers, Dallas, Philly again. They have some very easy running back matchups here in late November and in December. So once you get to that playoff time, championship round, Saquon Barkley has a chance to be a league-winning guy. And I'm sure Devontae Booker may play a bit more, but once again, Devontae Booker was hurt last week with a hip injury. He'll probably be okay. But Saquon Barkley, once he was healthy in weeks 2 through 4, so 2, 3, and 4, he was playing over 80% of snaps in all those games. So when Saquon was healthy, healthy. The Giants wanted to get him out there, use him as a 3-down back, so I'm not going to be concerned about Saquon's workload. Yes, it would help if Daniel Jones dumped the ball down to him more, but still, Saquon Barkley in these great matchups, if he's healthy, has a chance to be a very, very good running back to close out the year for fantasy football in 2021. Number 9 is buy or trade for Darren Waller. So Darren Waller, of course, the tight end for Las Vegas. He had his most targets in a game since week number 1. So Darren Waller came out in week 1, had 19 targets. That has not been replicated since, of course, but since then, he's had 7 targets, 7 targets, 7 targets, 8 targets, 5 targets, didn't play, came back off the bye, had 11 targets. So can some of that be because Henry Ruggs did not play? Probably, and they needed to pass the ball to somebody else. Now, the Raiders are adding DeSean Jackson. Someone in your league may look at that and say, oh, that's the Henry Ruggs replacement, which maybe he is, but I fully don't buy into the DeSean Jackson thing. I don't think Jackson at this point in his career is near the player that Henry Ruggs was, so I'm not buying into that. If I can buy Darren Waller, I definitely would do that. I think Darren Waller's going to have a lot more steady targets throughout the second half of the year. You know, as I said, he's had games with 7 targets, 5 targets, so you don't want to see that. I feel like a lot more games for Darren Waller will be around 10 targets, 12 targets, around there. If he gets those targets, he'll be a great option for fantasy, and the schedule coming up is not too terrible. Kansas City, Cincinnati, at Dallas, Washington, Kansas City again. I mean, those are some really good matchups here for Darren Waller. So if you can buy him right now and kind of convince the Darren Waller owner, hey, DeSean Jackson's here. He's not going to get as many targets. DeSean Jackson's still a name people know. So if you can buy Darren Waller, I definitely would try to do that. And number 10 is see what you can get for Alvin Kamara. This is not me saying sell Alvin Kamara for whatever the hell you can get. No, if you can get a good offer, a very good offer for Alvin Kamara, I would take that, honestly. Like, if you can get a Darrell Henderson plus wide receiver 2, if you can get a Joe Mixon plus wide receiver 2, if you can get, like, a running back just a step below Alvin Kamara plus another good starting piece, I would probably try to do that. Maybe even buy up. Like, maybe trade Alvin Kamara plus one of your bench pieces to get Najee Harris or someone like that. Like, Alvin Kamara is going to be fine. Alvin Kamara throughout his entire career since 2017 has been very, very efficient. But Alvin Kamara, through some points this year, was getting 24 carries, 20, 26, 20, 19. And then Mark Ingram came in, and since then, he has not played as many snaps. So Alvin Kamara has played at least 82% of the snaps for the Saints from weeks 2 to 7. So that's a 6-game sample size right there, I believe. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 6-game sample size of playing at least 82% of snaps. Since Mark Ingram has came over, Kamara's snap counts have been 67% and 68%. So Mark Ingram, as I mentioned before, is eating into the workload of Alvin Kamara. Does that mean Kamara's useless? No, he's still a running back 1 in my opinion, just not a top 3 or top 5 guy like he was before. So Alvin Kamara is going to be fine. Don't trade him for nothing, but if you can trade him based on the name value and some of the production, like, he's still putting up numbers. He's had 16 points and 20 points the past 2 weeks. If you can trade him and get better players and more depth, I feel like that's not the worst way to go about it, but it all depends on the offer. If you want to ask me in the comments, hey, would you do this trade? I'll gladly answer that. So don't trade him for nothing, but definitely try to look around and see how your league members value Alvin Kamara right now. Lastly, at number 11, we have sell Courtland Sutton, which may be a tough thing to do coming off 2 pretty bad games in a row. They have a tough matchup against the Eagles here in week number 10, but if you can sell Courtland Sutton to a team that's pretty much a lock for the playoffs, once again, a team that's 7-2, 8-1, if you can sell him to that type of owner and say, hey, I'm giving you a good wide receiver 3 for the playoff run or whatever, try and convince him on that. But Courtland Sutton, ever since Jerry Jeudy came back, he has not been targeted very much. Since Judy's came back, he's had 6 targets in 2 games, 4 2 games ago, and had 2 targets in the Sunday game against Dallas. So not the best target share for a guy like Courtland Sutton. And there's a lot of mouths to feed over there in Denver. Not even just the wide receivers, but Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. Then you talk about bringing back Jerry Jeudy. Tim Patrick's not going anywhere. Noah Fant's coming back from the COVID absence last week. There's a lot of mouths to feed here in this Denver offense. So Courtland Sutton may not have the targets to go his way. He may survive like Mike Evans survives, but Mike Evans is on a much, much better offense than the Denver Broncos have to offer. So Denver, look, they have a lot of weapons concerns there, but you can't really trust Courtland Sutton to be a consistent week to week, like, hey, he's going to get, 8 to 12 targets every week. He's going to have weeks now where Courtland Sutton gets 3 targets, 5 targets, 6, 4, 3. Sometimes it's going to be that way. So, I mean, it's going to suck, but, Courtland Sutton's a guy that if I can sell him based on the name value, and also try to convince your league members that entering this week, week number 9, Courtland Sutton was still leading the NFL in air yards. So if you can convince your league mates that, then that's a good way to go about it. So try and convince them, hey, if he fulfills those air yards, he'll be great, or something like that. So you can use that stat to your advantage. Anyway, that'll do it for this video. Hopefully everyone enjoyed. If you have questions, once again, leave them in the comments. Hopefully waivers go your way on Tuesday, and I will talk to you guys next time.